If you're playing Master Duel for the next few formats, it's best to get acquainted with the Adventure Engine right now. Similar to Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer, the Adventure Engine can be slotted into a ton of decks. There are 5 different main deck cards that we run, with 9 total slots in the main deck being dedicated to it. The first card is Water Enchantress of the Temple. We run 3 of this card. It is a monster that can be banished from your hand or graveyard to add Rite of Aramesir from your deck to your hand. Rite of Aramesir is the card that we need to get our Adventure Engine online, and Enchantress gives us 3 more copies of it in our deck. We run 3 Rite of Aramesir, and it is a spell card that special summons a level 4 Adventure token on the field, then places Fateful Adventure from your deck to the field. Rite is also where the deck building restrictions come in. The turn you activate Rite of Aramesir, you cannot activate the effects of monsters that you normal summoned on the field this turn. This applies to the entire turn as well, so you can't normal summon Alistair to add Invocation and then activate your Rite to get your Adventure Engine online. The card we get from Rite is Fateful Adventure, a continuous spell that we only run 1 of. Fateful Adventure has 2 main effects that we care about. If you normal summon or special summon a monster, you can add Dracoback the Rideable Dragon from your deck to your hand. Its second effect lets you add Wandering Griffin Rider from your deck to your hand by discarding a card. First up, let's go over Dracoback. Dracoback is an equipped spell that can be equipped to any monster you control. But when it's equipped to a normal monster, like the Adventure token that we just generated from Rite, you can return 1 card to your opponent's hand during your main phase. This card also has a recursion effect, where once per turn, if it's sent to the graveyard, you can equip it to an Adventure token that you control. Our last card is the big payoff to the Adventure Engine, Wandering Griffin Rider. Griffin Rider can special summon himself from the hand if you control an Adventure token, or if you have no monsters on your field. If you control an Adventure token, you can shuffle Griffin Rider back into the deck to negate any card activation or effect. Wandering Griffin Rider gives us an Omni-Negate before we start any of our deck's main combos. Now that we have a general idea of how each card works individually, let's look at how they work together. In this hand, we'll start off with Water Enchantress of the Temple and any normal summonable monster. We can activate Water Enchantress, who banishes itself to add a Rite of Aramesir from the deck to our hand. We then activate Rite of Aramesir to summon our Adventure token and place a Fateful Adventure from our deck to the field. We now normal summon any monster, which triggers Fateful Adventure's effect to add Dracoback to our hand. Using Fateful Adventure's other effect, we add Wandering Griffin Rider to our hand, then discarding the Dracoback that we just added. Dracoback's Graveyard effect activates, equipping it to our token. Now, since we control an Adventure token, Griffin Rider's summoning condition is met, and we can special summon him from our hand to the field. Before even interacting with our deck's main engine, we have 2 big payoffs. Wandering Griffin Rider is an Omni-Negate and Destroy during either player's turn. This includes hand traps, so you can protect your future plays from Nibiru or force out early Ash Blossoms. During our main phase, Dracoback can return any card on our opponent's field to the hand. So, if someone flips a skill drain on you, you can go through this line to turn off the skill drain without running any main deck spell or trap removal that would brick you in most matchups. All of this from 1 card, either Water Enchantress of the Temple or Rite of Aramesir. There are a few other important things about this engine, though not nearly as important as the main combo line. Enchantress has a second effect, where if you control an Adventure token, you can special summon this card from your hand. This lets it function as a combo extender if you have 2 Enchantresses in your hand, or you have Enchantress and the Rite. You can activate Enchantress's effect to add the Rite of Aramesir from the graveyard as well, so if you have a card that can discard the Water Enchantress, you can get more value out of that card. It also lets us run cards like Foolish Burial as another copy of Enchantress so that we can open our engine more consistently. If you want multiple copies to extend with, Fateful Adventure isn't limited to just grabbing Wandering Griffin Rider with its second effect. We can also grab Water Enchantress at the Temple by discarding a card. Or if we want the Rite, we can simply add the Water Enchantress, discard the Water Enchantress, and activate it to get another Rite to our hand. Griffin Rider's effect to special summon itself is actually a quick effect during either player's turn that starts a chain. So, if you're under max C, you can actually just not summon the Griffin Rider during your turn, but wait until the opponent's main phase. This gives you some point of interaction, while your opponent only gets 1 draw off the max C. Adventure is going to change the way that decks are built, and it gives them a ton of new options. Any deck list that I talk about in this section will be in the description on YGO Pro Deck, so please don't try to look at the images and rebuild the deck from that. Let's look at this new Phantom Knights list. This list is mostly similar to what Phantom Knights have been doing recently, as in moving away from Brongo Bongo to Artifact Scythe as the win condition, but the Adventure Engine pushes it over the edge, and it becomes way stronger and way more difficult to stop. Artifact Scythe is a monster that can be set in the spell and trap zone. If it's destroyed while in the spell and trap zone, it can special summon itself. Then, whenever this card is special summoned, your opponent cannot special summon from the extra deck for the rest of this turn. Note that Scythe's effect is continuous, like True King of all Calamities. So even if Scythe is destroyed or negated after the effect resolves, you are still locked from the extra deck. This is pretty unfair, and can auto-win games where it resolves. But to do so, we need two things. We need a way to get Scythe on our field, and we need a way to destroy Scythe during our opponent's turn. To get Scythe on our field, we can use Artifact Dagda. Dagda is a Link 2 monster with really generic materials, simply any two monsters with different names. His effect is that whenever another effect is activated on the field, you can set Scythe directly from the deck. This can be triggered by almost any monster, but for our purposes, activating Predaplant Verte Anaconda to fusion summon a Destiny Hero Destroyer Phoenix Enforcer is ideal. DPE can destroy our Scythe during the opponent's turn and enable our extra deck lock. This combo was possible before, but Wandering Griffin Rider being able to protect your boards from any interaction make this combo way easier to pull off. Phantom Knights excel in getting a bunch of random dudes on the board, and now any 4 of them can basically be converted into an extra deck lock. This virtual world list protects its plays with the Adventure Engine, but it's more concerned with the levels of the Adventure Engine. The Adventure Token is a level 4, and Griffin Rider is a level 7. This lets a virtual world access level 7 and 10 synchros, like Baron de Fleur and Chen Ying. The level 7 that we run is Shooting Riser Dragon, which you can make using Lulu and the Adventure Token. Shooting Riser sends a Fairy Tale Snow from your deck to the graveyard, changing Shooting Riser to a level 3. Then, with our Shooting Riser and our Griffin Rider, we can make the level 10 of our choice, either Baron de Fleur or Chen Ying. Baron de Fleur is an Omni-Negate, and Chen Ying is a non-targeting banish which we can activate with Fairy Tale Snow. Prank Kids doesn't change too much. It just gets a million times better. When you're playing a deck with 2 engines like Adventure Prank Kids, it becomes incredibly consistent when both engines are unlocked by a single card, with Prank Kids being able to access its entire engine with a single Prank Kid monster, and Adventure being able to access its entire engine with either Rite of Aramesir or Water Enchantress. Since both of these engines are accessed with a single card, your best hands have one piece of each backed up by strong hand traps or other staples. It also gives the deck a pretty massive benefit when trying to resolve your first Prank Kids effect. Let's quickly look at the choke point of Prank Kids before the Adventure Engine was added. When you make the first Meowmoo, your Prank Kid getting ashed here can end your turn, but if we have a Fateful Adventure on the field, we can chain block our Prank Kid with Fateful Adventure's effect to add Draco back when a monster is summoned. Your best boards are a double Raigeki with Battle Butler, an Omni-Negate with Wandering Griffin Rider, backed up by the usual Prank Kid staples, and now without a good choke point to hand trap their combo. Now, let's talk about what you can do to counter the Adventure Engine. If you have an Ash Blossom, I wouldn't recommend ashing the Water Enchantress unless maybe they're running a 60 card deck and you have another hand trap. If the list is around 40 cards, it's not unrealistic that they also have a Rite of Aramesir in hand. I would recommend using Ash Blossom on Fateful Adventure's effect that adds Wandering Griffin Rider from your deck to the hand. The logic is that if you Ash the Enchantress, they're also running 3 Rites, and can just do their combo anyways if they hard drew one. If you Ash the effect to add Wandering Griffin Rider, it's way less likely that they have the 1 of Griffin in hand than 1 of 3 Rites. Just make sure that you can clear the Fateful Adventure before the end of your turn if you do this. Pay attention to the game and make sure you're not ashing the effect that adds Draco back to the hand. As a reminder, the effect to add Draco back activates when a monster is normal or special summoned. The effect to add Wandering Griffin Rider is activated from an open game state. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit is crazy good for dealing with this engine. The best target to hit is Fateful Adventure. Continuous spells, field spells, and continuous traps need to stay on the field when resolving to actually get their effects. Ghost Ogre destroys, it doesn't negate. But if it destroys Fateful Adventure, that means it resolves without effect. Ghost Ogre is also good going up against Wandering Griffin Rider. Similar to Apex Avian, Griffin Rider needs to shuffle itself back into the deck to negate anything. But if you destroy the Griffin Rider by chaining Ghost Ogre, it's unable to shuffle itself from the field back into the deck, and it is no longer able to negate. This means you can save the Ash to interact with your opponent's main engine if you have the Ogre in hand. When they try to stop the Ash with Griffin, you can chain Ghost Ogre to stop the Griffin. Ogre being a Psychic also gives it synergy with decks that run Emergency Teleport like Virtual World or Phantom Knights. Ghost Ogre can be activated from the field as well as the hand. So you could E-Tele for a Ghost Ogre, and if they ever try to negate with Wandering Griffin Rider, you can just chain the Ghost Ogre from your field instead. Using the same logic with Ghost Ogre, Nibiru can also stop the Griffin Rider's negation effects. If you try to Ash something and your opponent chains Griffin Rider to negate it, you can chain Nibiru. By the time your Ash resolves, Griffin won't be on the field to shuffle itself back into the deck, because it was tributed by Nibiru. Token Collector is a high-impact hand trap that stops the Adventure Engine in its tracks. It destroys any tokens on the field and stops tokens from being summoned. Its weakness is how, in most matchups, it's generally really terrible. It also only really trades for the Adventure Engine, unless the deck using it is using other tokens like Sword Soul. Stopping the Scythe Lock is difficult. If your hand is all engine cards, it's just going to be an incredibly unfair game. You need 2 pieces of interaction to stop the Scythe Lock, or 3 if your opponent has Called by the Grave. Your first piece of interaction needs to be something that forces out the Griffin Rider, usually something like an Ash. Then, you need something to stop the DPE. If this is Nibiru, you need to Nibiru before the Dagda triggers or before Verte activates to get DPE out of the deck. If this card is instead something like Chalice or Imperm, then you need to do this on the opponent's turn when the DPE activates its effect to pop. If you have Forbidden Droplet, you actually only need that card. When DPE activates its effect to pop itself, chain Droplet and send at least 1 monster for cost. Because you sent a monster, Griffin can't respond to the droplets. Just to demonstrate why your interaction has to be quick play, let's look at Dark Ruler no more. This card sucks going up against the Scythe Lock. Your interaction has to be quick play because the DPE will pop Scythe in the draw or standby phase. And if you need to wait till the main phase to activate something like Dark Ruler, it's already too late. And that's it for the Adventure Engine. Hopefully I did a decent job at explaining how this engine can be useful for you and how you can stop it if you see it. Granted, it's not going to be easy. This engine is really powerful and can do some unfair things. As a reminder, all the lists that I talked about, including a few more, are going to be in the description, including Based, a new deck enabled by the Adventure Engine that I love so much, but is so complicated I don't have time to explain in this video. Thank you all for watching, and have a fantastic day.